God, we know that there's a difference in each of us. We're each unique, and you made us just the way we are. In Genesis it says we were made in your image. God, we reclaim that. Each of us are beautiful, that each of us are unique, and that we don't need to say I'm sorry anymore. And we don't need to think shamefully anymore, but be proud of who we are. Thank you for all those who are here today in support, to come out of the shadows, in solidarity with one another. Love will conquer hate. Lord, as we go in and we fellowship in food and we part ways with some and begin new relationships with others, Lord, we ask for your blessing. Bless us with your love. Bless us with empowerment. As we go forward, we do it proud, and we do it with our heads held high, and we do it because we know we are loved, and we will love others. In Jesus' name, amen.
Just kind of re-kick it off on a top-level look of where we are in our state. I'm sure everyone in this room is well aware that we can all still be LGBT people can still be fired or not hired or denied housing or denied service at any business based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. We had, like we've seen in a lot of other states, robust bills presented to our General Assembly this session. 26 bills were presented that affect the LGBT community. 9 of those were bills that Equality Virginia deemed harmful, such as a bill similar to HB2 that, as we all know, passed in North Carolina. Luckily, we have great advocates in this state, and we were able to kill 8 of those bills, and then the governor vetoed the 9th one. So everybody in the community should be proud that we're in a Commonwealth where no anti-LGBT legislation moved forward this year. However, there was quite a few good pieces that also only made it halfway through the system. And so one of those bills, and we'll spend about 5 minutes or so on this, a bill for conversion therapy. There's nothing in the code that prevents parents from taking their children to licensed professionals to get therapy to convince them they're not LGBT. There's also nothing preventing therapists from providing such advice. And so I'll start back down there with your experience first, just because you come from the professional side on your opinion of conversion therapy.
So my name's Amy Canova, and I'm a school psychologist. And if you don't know what a school psychologist is, that's okay, because until I became one, I don't think I knew what one was either. But in terms of a psychological perspective, conversion therapy is extremely unethical. And the basics of ethics indicate that you're not supposed to provide any harm or do any harm. And what we've seen from conversion therapy is it results in tremendous harm, and it can result in self-injurious behaviors, it increases mental illness, it often results in suicide. The other thing that frustrates me about it is when we're talking about informed consent, by law, informed consent means you have to understand the risks and the benefits and the research behind whatever technique that you're using. Conversion therapy is not research-based. There's no empirical basis to support it. However, parents are often religiously persuaded to enroll and have their children receive conversion therapy. And when you just think about it, it's oxymoronic, because it's not informed consent, because we're not telling them that there's no empirical basis for it. We're not telling them that it's unethical. And some of the techniques involve sleeping with your clients in order to get them to reject homosexual behaviors. They involve showing erotic homosexual images and using shock therapy against one's genitalia in order to prevent things like that. Last year, I have chills just thinking about it. Last year, I had a student ask me if I could edit their paper, because my first major was screenwriting, so I can edit writing pretty well. And the way she came out to me was giving me her essay on the damage conversion therapy has done to her. She received conversion therapy at the age of 16 in Northern Virginia. One of my frustrations with school policy is we have school policy that protects students, we don't have school policy that protects staff. And we're sending a mixed message to students saying we accept you, we understand where you're coming from, we support you, but they don't have an adult they can relate to, because as you were mentioning, James, you can be fired and discriminated against in employment by identifying as LGBTQ. And so when you've got a kid that identifies that way and they don't have an adult role model, because most of the times queer kids don't have queer parents, they look to the school and they've got no one that they can talk to because teachers are closeted and their school psychologists and their social workers and their counselors, their administrators are closeted because they don't want to lose their job. So one of the other things I'd like to see schools work on instituting is protections for staff.
Another thing on that level is our Attorney General released an opinion March of 2015 that said school boards have the constitutional authority to protect their teachers and their employees and their students from discrimination, including discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, which is a giant leap forward in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And just in the 15 months since that opinion, 27% of public school students and teachers and employees are now protected under non-discrimination policies that include sexual orientation and gender identity. Floyd County actually is one of the counties who has a bullying policy that includes sexual orientation and gender identity, but not a non-discrimination. And studies also show that schools that have what we call bullying policies that are explicit, that spell out what is not allowed, including bullying against other students based on their sexual orientation or gender identity, there's less instances of bullying. So we definitely want to have policies in place that explicitly say you cannot taunt, harass, bully other students based on these things.
But research has consistently shown that schools that have a GSA, regardless of the makeup of it, have much lower rates of mental illness among LGBT youth, as well as lower rates of harassment and bullying.
But then if there's no work around the policy, it's just a piece of paper. And so then we need other people going into schools, working with us on making sure teachers are culturally competent, administrators are culturally competent, and we'll get to that in a second, but that's as much
Can I
as...
jump
Oh,
in?
yeah, go ahead.
My brother is also gay. He was doing cartwheels into home plate in Little League. He's that special. He teaches music for high school up in Fairfax County, and he runs the school's Gay Straight Alliance, and that school in particular has a very specific bullying policy that includes sexual orientation and gender identity. And he's run this program for 10 years now, and he has seen the incidence of bullying against those who identify as LGBTQ gone down to practically zero in the years that they've had that policy.
I got an email actually from James about what was happening in Grayson. And my first instinct was to call the superintendent of schools in Grayson County. And it took about a week, but I finally got him on the phone and we talked for about an hour. What I've been doing with him is I've been trying to create a set of procedure and policy that will reduce the amount of fear that the parents in the county have, that the superintendent and the school board have, but also at the same time using schools in transition, create an area of inclusivity for transgender students and a place where they're protected, and thereby increasing the safety for all LGBT students. I'm a personal huge believer in GSAs. I think they're vital. I'm also a big fan of GLSEN's Safe Space initiative, where there are stickers and ways of letting children know that this particular teacher is somebody that you can go to if you're having a problem, and they will listen to you. I know from my own personal experience in school, you get into a space where you don't trust anybody. You don't trust any teacher. And so I think it's very important to have a teacher that is visible, that you can come to, and that you know will listen, because that can make all the difference in the world.
And that is another reason why the Attorney General's decision was so important, because again, prior to that, every gay and transgender teacher in the state was a PTA witch hunt away from being fired. And so in a place like Grayson that doesn't have those protections for teachers and employees, those teachers who do that and do those safe space stickers, they're really, or even in this county, those teachers need a lot of support, because they're really putting their neck out there, because there is zero legal protections for them as employees. And it's the conversations like Kristen's talking about, it's the conversations with school administrators or challenging the school administrators like she's talking about, and then it's like the work that Justin's doing with the business community, because as we've seen, In North Carolina, HB2, while passed, is really, the state is really suffering by our allies in the business community, and even better in Georgia, you know, the business community really was fundamental in having the governor veto that bill. So I just wanted to make sure we give Justin some minutes to talk about like how are we as a community engaging the business culture and also the successes that's coming out of that.
Sure, there's a bazillion things to talk on. It's first I'll start off with a statistic. The LGBT purchasing power in the United States is $884 billion. When you look at the two largest minority populations, the Hispanic community and the African American community, and they represent roughly between 17 to 18% and 13% respectively. The LGBT purchasing power, say, and it's hard to say how many LGBT people there are in the country, but as you say, it's 6, maybe 7%. It's certainly not 10%, but maybe in San Francisco it is. But if you take that $884 billion, the concentration of wealth within the LGBT community is 66% higher than that in the African American community and 69% higher than the largest minority, the Hispanic community. And when you do the math, corporations have been at the forefront of leading the conversation through the language of economics. You have seen in North Carolina and other states large corporations refusing to set up plants, refusing to do business, having state governments saying we're not allowed to send folks from New York City or Seattle to do official business in North Carolina. And musicians have pulled out from performing concerts, and that's huge, huge revenue loss. We're talking millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. And corporations also led the way in terms of having employee resource groups, basically consider the safe spaces in schools in corporate culture. And these employee resource groups for the LGBT community, for those employees and their allies, have created a corporate culture of not just tolerance, but understanding and community where everybody works together as a team. Because study after study has proven that much like in schools, when a child can bring their authentic selves to the classroom, they can learn better, they engage better with others, and they're just more productive students. Same is true in the workplace. When you're an employee and you have a picture of your same-sex spouse or identify with the gender pronoun of your choice, and nobody bats an eye, you're more productive, everybody's happier, and it creates a culture, but it has to come from the top down.
Do you have any comment on the fact that most of the wealth in the LGBT community belongs to white cisgender gay men who often do not have the best interests of queer, non-white people or trans people in mind as specific individuals? I know many do, but many also don't.
No, that's an excellent point. The LGBTQ community, as we all know, is anything but monolithic. What's interesting about the community is it represents slivers of the rest of society. Race, religion, ethnic minority, socioeconomic background, education. And we all come from different perspectives, and we all bring those experiences with us. And you're absolutely right. Just because the LGBT community's purchasing power is very much power, it's often concentrated within the gay white male populations, that segment of that community. And people of color, transgender individuals, women, I mean, there's still a gender pay gap. I mean, you consider two men bringing home double income, no kids, now they can have the kids, get married, all that, that's great. But women still aren't paid as much as men. And so you have two women and you have two men, of course there's going to be a disparity. And those are types of conversations that when you talk about the pink dollar, it's almost a myth because it doesn't bring the full complex narrative to bear. And the notion that there is this monolithic entity of the LGBTQ community, it's a farce. But if we continue these challenging conversations from the school systems to Main Street, to Wall Street, to grassroots organizations, to lobbying organizations, we can start actually having the types of conversations that effectuate change. And I think that that's a beautiful thing, and we're doing it right here in Virginia. I see some hands, it's shadows.
It seems to me that a lot of the ignorance that you're fighting in Grayson, and God knows it's only in Grayson, it's nowhere else. It seems that a lot of the opposition is casual ignorance. And should the, I guess, should we have a media plan? Should there be an actually worked out media plan for getting into the public eye as much as possible locally here in Floyd? I'm not talking about the world, but familiarity breeds contempt, but familiarity also banishes this level of ignorance.
It does. People have always been, throughout time, fearful of the other.
Right.
At times it was Native Americans, African Americans, Irish, Jews, I mean, you name it, there's always been an other. And you see that still, and it hasn't gone away. I think that the more organized any entity, any movement, any community is, in terms of their public appearance and the way that they approach individuals who can effectuate change, maybe through school superintendents or elected politicians or CEOs of corporations, or even just chambers of commerce. If you can be organized, succinct, and present something that's attractive, look, sell. You have to have something that it tells your story authentically, but also presents well. Organization is everything. Passion is fabulous, but until you have it organized, documented, written down, you got nothing.
That's the next piece, but it's all about voices being incorporating the business voice or the grassroots voice or the educator's voice or the ally's voice or the community's voice. We all have to keep talking about these conversations because that's how we're going to create change. So thank you, Jim, and everybody for having us so much. We really and thank you, Justin, and Kristen,
Thank you. James, Justin, Kristen, and Amy, thank you so much for your heart, your intelligence. Your struggle is our struggle, and every voice counts. And that includes every voice in this room. Every single person counts. It's not because they're here and they're sitting on this side of the table. You have a voice. You have a neighbor. You have a child. Every voice counts.
And I want to hear it.
Yes. I want each of you to know that you are empowered. And that was the huge message that came to me that got me out from under my rock after my 30-year marriage. It was pain. It was a message to me that I have a voice. And you have a voice. I want you to know that each one of you has a powerful voice. Don't denigrate yourself. Don't find an excuse for it. Speak about lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. It shows courage. It shows understanding. It shows compassion. And I want to make a little quote. And the Savior said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not." He didn't say the cisgender children. He didn't say the straight children. He didn't qualify it. He said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me." That is not a lifestyle he was judging. We are all little children. Thank you.
We are singing for our lives. We are gentle and great people. We are singing for our lives. Gentle and great people. We are